Welcome back. If you're someone who loves digging into the profound mechanics behind life's biggest mysteries, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving into an explainer of a deeply fascinating text by Shri Chandra Gautam. We're going to impartially map out the complex, metaphysical architecture of death and the incredible journey of the soul, exactly as his source material lays it out.
So let's get right to it and tackle the ultimate universal question: what actually happens after we die? The text we're looking at explores the intense consequences of how exactly our life comes to an end. It suggests that the specific manner of our passing actually dictates the entire trajectory of the soul. Okay, to really grasp this, we first need to establish the author's core premise. Basically, human existence is split into two distinct parts. First, you've got the Sthul Sharir, which is just our physical form, our gross body, and then there's the Sukshma Sharir, the subtle body, which represents our spiritual essence and consciousness. According to the text, death is simply the separation of these two bodies. But here's the thing: the ease of that separation depends entirely on how we die.
The author uses these absolutely incredible, vivid analogies to explain this separation. Think about a ripe piece of fruit. A natural passing is like that mature fruit just effortlessly letting go of the branch. But a sudden death, it's like violently uprooting a completely green, deeply rooted plant. The roots tear, the ground breaks. A sudden death painfully rips the subtle body away from the physical one. Metaphysically speaking, the author suggests that old age, or even a prolonged illness, actually serves a vital purpose. It slowly unties that subtle body from the gross body. Day by day, those internal connections just kind of loosen, making the final moment of separation a seamless transition rather than an abrupt, massive shock. We usually complain about being sick, right? But the text actually frames illness as, quote, nature's chloroform. It's described as this merciful anesthesia provided by a higher power, a natural numbing process that clouds the senses, specifically to dull the deep, metaphysical pain of the soul leaving its physical vessel. Think about a time you were completely bedridden with a crazy high fever. The text notes that while sick individuals might seem awake, aware, and even talkative, their deepest emotional ties are already letting go. During a high fever, sudden intense passions, like deep anger toward an enemy or intense romantic affection, they just temporarily fade away. Your consciousness starts detaching from earthly dramas. That is the chloroform taking effect, prepping the soul for transition.
But what happens when all that preparation is stolen away by an accident or a sudden tragedy? That vital chloroform is completely missing. The text uses a pretty chilling metaphor here. It's like undergoing major surgery with a blunt knife and an amateur doctor. The sheer shock rips the soul out with zero anesthetic, creating unimaginable distress for the spiritual self.
And this brings us to a really crucial and, frankly, terrifying window: 1 hour. The author explains that if a victim dies within an hour of a tragic accident, their physical body might be crushed, broken, and medically dead, but their subtle body, it's fully awake. Because there was no illness to loosen the ties beforehand, the soul feels the absolute entirety of that agonizing, unnumbed separation. To really emphasize how life force clings to a suddenly killed body, the text points out a wild observation from nature. It notes that carnivorous scavengers will often turn their noses up at naturally dead animal meat, but they eagerly consume slaughtered meat. According to the author's framework, this is because a naturally dead animal's life force has totally departed. But in a slaughtered animal, the life force was violently ripped away and actually remains partially attached to the physical body. This lingering life force creates a genuinely fascinating timeline. The source cites medical observations suggesting that a suddenly killed body takes much, much longer to fully die on a metaphysical level. While a doctor might declare a victim medically dead on day 1 because the heart stopped, the subtle body's complete detachment might not happen until somewhere between day 5 and day 11. So for days, the spiritual essence is literally caught lingering between two worlds. During this limbo period, the soul's distress is immense. The text describes a harrowing state where the soul is essentially split in half. 50% is still trapped, feeling the trauma and physical agony of the gross body, while the other 50% frantically hovers outside, totally disoriented and actively investigating its own demise to figure out what just happened. While it's in this hovering state, an immense emotional weight just crushes the subtle body. The text describes the soul looking down at its destroyed physical form, suddenly realizing all of its unfinished business. It experiences the shocking separation from family and loved ones.
Combine that with the lingering physical pain, and it creates a deeply sorrowful, agonizing state where the soul is just overwhelmed by its own abrupt ending. Let's track how this trauma actually builds, especially in the case of a murder. The soul first lingers in total confusion, but as the reality of the violent death sets in, a fiery, intense anger consumes it. This massive rage can ultimately transform the victim's soul into a vengeful, restless spirit, which the text refers to as a peshach or vital.
Now, according to the author, there are universal rules that attempt to pull this traumatized soul into the next resting realm. However, the extreme trauma creates a powerful resistance. Even as it's dragged toward a place meant for rest, its mind is entirely anchored in the past. It repeatedly wakes up from its metaphysical slumber, reliving the event and entirely rejecting the comfort and guidance of other peaceful spirits.
Because it refuses to move on, the spirit targets its killer. The vengeful spirit uses its hardening, subtle body to inflict severe mental torture. The murderer begins to suffer from completely unexplainable anxiety, horrifying nightmares, sudden nocturnal panics, and just deep, unseen mental anguish. Over time, as this rage-fueled spirit focuses intensely on earthly desires, its subtle body hardens and grows powerful enough to cross over into physical influence. The text notes these restless spirits can allegedly cause actual physical harm to their enemies, or, on the flip side, grant sudden favors to those who manage to please them.
Which brings us to a deeply profound question. If the ease of our spiritual transition relies so heavily on how our physical body breaks down, how does the way we live, and ultimately the way we die, shape the spiritual weight of our afterlife? Shri Prabodhchandra Gautam's text really leaves us with a lot to ponder about that fragile link between our physical and subtle selves. Keep questioning everything, and I'll see you next time.